Hi, let's learn about Confucianism. Here's a portrait of Master Confucius himself, done about 1,000 years after Confucius lived during the Tang Dynasty. A dynasty, by the way, is just a ruling family, and Chinese history for thousands of years, up until 1911, is just a series of ruling families, one after the other. So, just so you know. Okay, so again, his name is Confucius. We call him Confucius just because Westerners couldn't really pronounce this in the correct way. He's a real person who did live between 551 and 479 BCE. The situation of his life is kind of cloudy. We don't really know for sure, but we do think that he was the son of maybe a poor nobleman, or maybe he was a army officer who lived sometime during the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty is one of the longest of Chinese dynasties. It's really famous for lots of important writers and poets and philosophers like Confucius. But it was also a time of serious social decline, right? And infighting, political problems, different people trying to overthrow Zhou leaders, challenging their authority. So it was a time of a lot of chaos into which Confucius was born. So for Confucius, he thought that the way that you can deal with this chaos and confusion, the way that you restore order to society, is that you first start by building better human beings. And he called his ideal human is called a Chun Tzu, right? A virtuous person who has perfect moral character. And the way that you achieve this is, not that you're born with it, but you achieve it through lifelong effort and learning and continuous self-reflection and self-improvement. You really have to start with yourself, Confucius said, in order to create a better society. It's kind of summed up in this image here, this schematic, right? That goes along with this saying by Confucius: to put the world in order, you have to put the nation first. Put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, you have to first put the family in order. To put the family in order, you must first cultivate your personal life, and you must first set your own hearts straight. So you are like this little target in the middle here, right? And in order for all of the other circles to hold, that core, that root has to be in place first. So start with yourself. So you might think that this is a real like individual sort of kind of philosophy, emphasizing just yourself. But in fact, Confucius put a huge sort of priority or importance on human relationships. So here are the 5 key relationships that are defined by Confucius. Well, I wonder if you can tell what's similar about these relationships, first of all. And then secondly, which is the most important? Like, if you're going to have a good society, if you're going to have world peace, starting with, at home, which of these relationships is the most important? Okay, so I'll tell you what Confucius said. Of the relationships, the most important is the parent and child. I'll explain why here in a minute. And what is similar about them? Well, I think you can probably tell. They are all, well, except for the last one, they are all hierarchical. And that's because Confucius believed that we are social beings. We are products of our relationships. That means that the individual is not as important as the community. This is like a huge thing in East Asian society, right? Like this whole idea of individuality and freedom, personal freedom that we Americans believe in so much. That's just not in line with East Asian society, where there's a different kind of emphasis more on the group as a whole, rather than your own freedom within that. What is your role in the larger system? That's really what's important. And this idea of hierarchy is natural. So, here, none of these relationships are equals, right? Like it's the ruler is supposed to protect and take care of the subject. In return, the subject is supposed to be obedient and respectful towards the ruler. The same sorts of things happen between father and son. Father takes care of son, son obeys, respects father. Same with husband and wife. This is a patriarchal society where men held power. Interestingly, also with older brother and younger brother, or siblings, right? This is still a really powerful cultural thing in East Asia. When I taught at a boarding school in Thailand, it actually caused trouble because older kids, right, like 10th graders, would expect 7th graders to obey them and show them respect. And it got to the point where like we had to stop the older kids from like almost like what we would call bullying, right? Like making the younger kids do their laundry, make their beds for them. It's like, and we were like, no, this is not really how it's going to work. But in some ways, we were imposing our own cultural values on an ancient, embedded cultural system where the idea was that younger kids do obey and respect older kids, right? I wonder, do you think we have that here at school where people in older grades expect people from younger grades to obey them and do what they say just because they're older? But this respect for age, right? Equals should treat each other equally, but the only relationship where you see that is between friend and friend. Okay, so, relationships are important, working on self-improvement. What are the 3 main Confucian virtues? This is what Confucius taught. There are many, but let's just focus on the 3 big ones, right? I like this schematic of an Asian bowl, right? The 3-footed Asian bowl, right? To help you remember that there are 3 main virtues associated with Confucianism. I'm going to walk through each one of these. The first one is Ren or Jen. I think the best way to think about it is just think of it as kindness or compassion. But there's more to it. I'll explain. The second one is Li, which is ritual or manners or proper etiquette, outward behavior, and then Xiao, which is respect for your family. Okay, so let's go through each one of these. The first one is Ren. What I want to point out here first is the Chinese character, the symbol for Ren, which is made up of 2 things. One is the symbol for human, and the other is the symbol for the number 2. That's important here, and I'll come back to that. I'll circle back to that in a second. But here's a quote by Confucius that really sort of sums it up, what Ren is all about. It says, "What you do not desire for yourself, do not do to others." This should sound super familiar to you. We call it the golden rule, right? Like, do unto others as you would have others do to you. Interestingly here, though, it's kind of the reverse, right? Like Confucius doesn't tell you what to do, he tells you what not to do, which it's a slight subtle difference, but the emphasis there is more on restraint rather than action, which kind of implies like modesty and humility. And these are values that are taken in such high regard in Chinese society, like being restrained, controlling yourself, right? Like rather than just action, just do it, right? Like it's just a subtle difference in cultural emphasis. But this idea, though, is also, so some people translate it into being kind, right? But there's a little bit more than just being kind here. The underlying concept here is like one of reciprocity. Like if you are a respectful person, then people will be respectful to you. If you are kind and sincere, then people will trust you. If you are honest, you will be successful. So this idea that what you give out to others comes back to you from others. So that's why this kind of human and the 2 kind of makes sense, because it's a 2-way street. It's you and the rest of the world. That's what creates the humanity. Okay, so you get the point there. That's really kind of the basis. Okay, the second Confucian value is called Xiao, or filial piety. Filial means family, and piety means worship or honor. So you might think of it as honoring your family, literally devotion to your family. And that's not just living family, that's also dead family. Like, in other words, your ancestors. And many Chinese people, who have adopted Confucian values will have in their house like a shrine to their dead ancestors, and they'll pray to that and give offerings to it. So it's a deeply rooted emphasis on family in Chinese society, and this idea that charity begins at home. Here's just a saying from the Analects. These are Confucius's writings that kind of emphasize how this idea of filial piety, like if you are a filial son and respectful brother, you're not going to be one who is disrespectful to superiors. You are not going to be someone who creates disorder. A superior man is devoted to his or her family, and that's how morals grow, and that's the root of all of humanity. I'm just paraphrasing it there for you. This idea that goodness begins at home. This is so deeply rooted. I saw this, like my personal example has to do with hospitals, right? Like if you're in the hospital in the West, you go in and, you know, you have nurses and doctors who take care of you, and your family may visit you on visiting hours, but they're not there all the time, right? Like the professionals are being paid. They take care of you. Hospitals in East Asia are not like that. The doctor will come in and do the surgery or whatever, but all of the rest of the care happens from your family. Your family is expected to be there. They're there all the time. They change your bed sheets. They help you take a shower. They look after you, right? So all of the nursing care really is done by your own family, which is really interesting. It's a different, it reflects a different, deeply embedded culture in East Asia. You can also see this filial piety in this story that happened in China. I think it's like last year, where this man here, he's not young, he's probably like 40 something, went home to visit his elderly parents. They're like 80 for some Chinese holiday, and here he is bowing to say goodbye, like, you know, I'm sorry, and he's crying, but this is a sign of respect, and he's also apologizing for leaving them for so long on their own. And this just became a huge meme in China, like exploded on Chinese social media, and everybody's like, this guy is the best, right? So on China's Twitter-like platform, many people were saying great things about this guy, Zhang, and his bowing to his parents. Somebody's like, people from Shandong are influenced by Confucian philosophy from the early ages. As long as your parents are alive, you should not leave for too long. These are the words carved in many people's hearts. So, you know, just celebrating this man who became sort of a minor celebrity for his behavior, his exhibition of a proper filial piety to his parents. Okay, so we've got Zhen, or compassion, kindness, goodness, and filial piety, Xiao. The last of the three Confucian values is Li, which is ritual or ceremony or manners or etiquette or proper outward behavior, right? Formal outward behavior. And we in America tend to see this as like, I don't know, just chill out, dude. Like we think of formal behavior as pretentious or sort of fake. But in East Asia, ceremony is hugely important, and it means a lot. So, you know, if you're going to visit East Asia, you need to brush up on your proper manners and behavior, because it says a lot about you. The idea is that rituals, our behavior, makes your virtue manifest and visible. So in other words, if you are a good person, if you have a good character, it will show in the way that you behave. And you cannot be a good person if your outward behavior is, you know, not up to par. So, you know, if you go to Japan, for example, you need to know how do you bow to people. Bowing is an outward ritual, outward behavior, and it's really important. People take it seriously, like to the point that, you know, how deep you bow really matters, and is saying something about how much respect you have for the person that you are greeting. And the idea here is that when you behave properly outwardly, your outward behavior should match your inner behavior, and that creates a good society. Right, but it's also interesting to think about how these things go back and forth, right? Like, you might be like, oh, I can't behave properly because I just don't feel well today. Well, a Confucian might say, well, if you behave properly, you will feel well, right? So these things kind of reinforce each other. It doesn't matter how you feel, behave correctly, and you will feel correctly as well. Okay, so why did Confucius do all this? Well, he was an advisor to the government, and he thought that by teaching all of these things, he could help eliminate the chaos of the late Zhou dynasty. So he had a lot of advice for rulers. One of the things he said is that the ruler's main function is to educate people, right? If you want to bring about peace in a good society, you need to help people improve. And if you're going to help people improve, you yourself have to be the model, right? So you have to be an honest and morally upright person so that the people know how they should behave. You cannot be a good ruler if you are not a good moral person. But if you are a good ruler, that will promote, we will see that reflected outwardly in social stability and prosperity, right? Populations will grow, people will get wealthy, things will be good as long as you have a good ruler That's how it extends outwards. And which is remarkable, I think, in our own Declaration of Independence says something similar to this, right? That you have the right to rebel against a ruler who does not fulfill his duties to the people. Okay, this is all kind of strange in a way because we talked about, I think, this idea of the mandate of heaven in Chinese society, where why does the ruler have the right to rule? Because heaven gives him that right? Well, Confucius is sort of saying something different, right? He's saying it's not some outward mysterious heaven that gives you the right to rule. It's not the gods who give you the right to rule. You have the right to rule based on your own character, which you can affect. You can change your own character. So work on yourself, get good character, and then you can be a good ruler. So Confucius is coming at it a little bit different from this whole mandate of heaven idea. It really is in your control to be a good ruler and to create a good society. So it has this big effect on Chinese society, right? This idea that you are combining your inner character, feelings, behavior, attitudes with your outward actions, ritual, ceremony, behavior, and that when you do that, when it all comes together, there's no limit to human potential, right? You can really achieve great things. People in society can move up. Right? You are not stuck in one social class forever. Because you can improve yourself. So this leads to the idea, some people, scholars, credit Confucius with this idea of a meritocracy, and that China is the first, in world history, the first meritocracy, right? So you can probably guess what that means. If democracy is ruled by the demos or people, meritocracy is ruled by those who have merit, those who deserve it, those who are deserving for whatever qualities you have defined. So Confucius is defining it as people who have these great qualities. They're good people. Those are the people who deserve to rule. So the picture that you see here is something that started in Chinese society because of Confucius. It's called the civil service exams. If you want to serve in government, you have to take a really rigorous test to prove that you have good character, that you understand Confucianism, that you've studied Confucius, that you can read and write, that you have all the good qualities that we are looking for in a ruler, right? It doesn't matter who your father is or who your family is or how wealthy you are. None of that matters as long as you can prove it, that you have merit. So Confucius is credited with this, and it really is an idea that we think of as a very modern idea, but actually it's hundreds of years old in ancient China. There you go. That's the basics of Confucianism. I think you have a good handle on it now.